صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آل محمد صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So today, I guess we are here for marking the Soyem of the 10th of MUHARRAM. For those who are not aware of what Soyem means or what it stands for, then just for your benefit, really, just a little bit about that. So Soyem literally means like the third, so the third day after the death of a person, and traditionally it's kind of something that's been narrated as something that is done, especially for a believer. If a believer passes, you kind of mourn for 3 days at least with them. So you get the traditions that 3 days is there, and that's known as Soyem, or some people call it Qul. And so that's why kind of we tend to have in our majalis the tradition that we have these third day. And then also there's a Chi'lam or the Arba'in, which is the 40th, and that's done 40 days after the passing of a mu'min. And again, narrations and hadiths that sort of talk about that relate to the fact that the earth mourns for a believer for at least 40 days. So that's where this comes from. And again, one of the other reasons why we mark it a lot is because, unfortunately, Imam Hussein al-Islam, his kind of burial didn't take place. Okay, it wasn't a proper burial, there was nothing there for him. And we kind of mark the occasion ourselves to make sure that no one forgets the 10 days of Muharram, the Soyem of Imam Hussein and his companions, and then also the 40th day after the passing of the Imam. So, normally on this sort of day, I just take a few minutes up just to talk about kind of the last 10 days and kind of how things have progressed. So, as most people are probably aware, the story of Karbala kind of specifically started around the 28th of Rajab, when Yazid became the leader, or the so-called leader of the Muslims. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Yeah, if you talk.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
And so, what happened at that point was that Yazid didn't have any legitimacy as a leader, and this is where we find out how the stance that Imam Hassan al-Islam took was a stance that showed and exposed the fraudulent nature of the Banu Umayyah, because the agreement that he made with Muawiyah, which was a peace treaty, was that he would, if Muawiyah passed away, then Yazid, then there would need to be an election or a council of kind of who gets voted in as a new leader. So, but unfortunately, that never happened. With,
I think if you speak up a bit.
yeah, maybe
I'll
go through a course.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Yeah, I think if you speak up a bit, then it will pick up the volume.
Okay. So that's where we find that that's kind of where things started from, and then as we go on through the journey of Imam alayhi salam, we find him kind of going through and reaching Karbala in the start of Muharram, and then from there we saw the armies of Ibn Ziyad and of Yazid starting to come and gather. So I'll briefly just talk about kind of what happened, why it happened, how it happened, and then we'll end it there, inshallah. But so by the time the Imam reaches Karbala, there is, which is around the 2nd of Muharram, then you find that Umar ibn Asad and his army start to come in as well. Now, they mostly come from the area of Kufa towards Karbala, and what we find is that as the days go on, there's more and more of the armies coming. So this is where you'd have tribal leaders who would come and bring around a few thousand people with them, and they rounded up quite a lot of people from Kufa and from other areas, from where they had a stronghold, and started bringing them into Karbala. So by the time it gets to the 8th of Muharram, there's nearly 30,000 people at least, or army at least on one side, and you've got the Imam and his between, let's say, 70 to 100 people on the Imam's side. And so what then happens on the 9th of on the 9th of Muharram, then Shimr comes from Ibn Ziyad as one of to deliver a message to Umar bin Saad, and says you need to start to either get the bay'ah or the allegiance from Imam Hussein, or otherwise there's going to have to be a forceful extraction of either Imam and his family, and getting them either killed or forcing the allegiance from them. And again, the forcing of the allegiance was really because of all the work that Imam Hassan had done on the peace treaty, where he had made it clear that if Muawiyah passes away, then there is no one that Muawiyah can appoint as his successor. So again, I just want to make that point really clear, because people sometimes accuse Imam Hassan of being someone who wasn't someone who wanted to kind of get involved in war or defend his religion and family, which is completely untrue, because the way he did it was a way where it exposed them for the rest of history and the rest of time that there is a fraudulent nature of the way Bani Umayyah operated. Nevertheless, we get to sort of the 9th of Muharram, and Shimr comes, and Shimr, just for awareness, his tribe was related to the tribe of Hazrat Abbas through their mum, al-Banin. So he comes and he then goes to the camp of Imam Hussein and says, "Oh, sons of my sister, you are all given immunity from us. You can leave and we won't do anything to you." And this is where Abbas, which is why we revere him so much, is his loyalty to Imam Hussein was second to none. Him and his brothers as well. We shouldn't forget the brothers of Abbas, because they were also from the same family and the same mum, and they got the same upbringing, which was to serve their Imam and be loyal to him, and to be of those who would sacrifice themselves. So him and his three brothers, Ja'far, Uthman and Abdullah, they all said to him, or Abbas said on behalf of them, "Curse to you, O Shimr, and to your immunity. Why would we want immunity when you don't give immunity to the grandson of the Prophet?" And at that point, then kind of things went away, and the battle was meant to start on the 9th of Muharram to begin with, and then Imam sort of sent Abbas to go and say, "Give us one more night." And the night was done as a night of worship, a night of prayer, reading the Quran, family time, and then the 10th of Muharram came about. So now we know kind of why the 10th of Muharram came about, was because of the fact that Yazid was not a legitimate leader, and the Imam wouldn't give allegiance, and Yazid needed the Imam's allegiance to be able to make himself look as though he is fit for this particular position. The what and the how it happened is the harder bit, and this will go into the Masa'ib quickly now for you guys. But what we find is that on the 10th of Muharram, it wasn't really a battle, it was a massacre or a butchering of one side. You had at least, as I said, 30,000 people, armed men, mercenaries, all kind of going for a group of people who were about 70 to 100 in number, and had not had any water for the last 3 days either. They cut the water off. And so we give our kind of, I guess, as we look back at what happened over the 10 days on the 10th of Muharram in particular, our salutations go to those brave companions who were the first to give their lives for the Imam. So this is why the Imam says, if the companions I had, no other leader, no other Imam, no other Prophet had those sorts of companions who were willing to sacrifice themselves and everything that they had for their Imam and for their religion, and for ultimately for Allah. So the companions were the first to go in the morning, and on the 10th of Muharram, the fighting started just after Fajr prayers, with Umar ibn Saad shooting the first arrow and saying, "Bear witness, everybody, that I was the first one to start this war against Imam Hussein and his companions." In the morning, the companions all gave their lives honourably to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Then it became the time of the Bani Hashim to step up and start giving their their sacrifices. And we remember and recall all of these during the 10 days of Muharram. We have particular days where we remember certain personalities. And just as a reminder, as we go through this next couple of minutes, the first, or one of the first from the Imam's side was Ali al-Akbar. He was the son of the Imam, and he was the only one who wasn't refused when he came to the Imam and said, "Can I go?" And this was because he was representing the Imam during the battle. And it's said that when Ali al-Akbar was leaving, that the ladies were very, very attached to him, his aunties, his sisters, etc., his mum. And it was said that the Imam had to go into the camp and actually tell them, "You need to let him leave now because he needs to go for his battle." And it said that he looked like the Prophet, which was another reason why it was such a surprise for people when he came on the battlefield. And what we find with the Ali al-Akbar is that his life was given very valiantly. He fought a very courageous fight, but ultimately there's kind of different narrations as to how he passed, but the more common one that we hear is that he was hit with a spear into his heart, and that was kind of left in there, and the Imam had to ultimately take that spear out. Another narration is that as he was fighting, he got struck, blood covered the eyes of his horse, and the horse went into the enemy's area. And it's written in the Maqtal that he was cut into pieces as his horse went into the Maqtal, as his horse went into in the enemy's side. Then we have the likes of Qasim ibn Hassan. So Qasim was the son of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, 13 odd years old roughly, and when he went to fight, it was said that was probably the hardest one for the Imam to give permission to. He didn't want to give permission to Qasim because he was his older brother who had passed away, his young son. And it was difficult for the Imam to give Qasim permission, but as Qasim went, it said that Qasim was so small and his arm was so big that it kind of, when the enemy saw him, they just thought, this doesn't look right, what is this? But then he fought really bravely and valiantly. And again, from the narrations that we have, Qasim's body was also unfortunately trampled on ultimately, because as he got hit, he cried out to his uncle and the Imam. The Imam came rushing towards the body of Qasim, and it said that the enemies kind of got confused with the valiant way of the Imam coming in, and they were going one way to the other way, and as they were doing that, they were trampling over the body of Qasim, which ultimately resulted in him kind of, when he was passed away, and he was literally in pieces. Then we also remember the likes of Abbas alayhi salam. Abbas was the commander and what we call the Alamdar, the person with the flag bearer. And Al-Abbas was one of the last ones to go, according to most of the narrations. And again, he only went because his mission was to get water for the camp. And it is said that when he went, he actually made it to the Furat, which was a river where the water was being blocked by the forces of Yazid and Umar ibn Sa'ad. And he came back, as he was coming back with the water, it is said that his right arm was severed, his left arm was severed. And then they say that when he had the water in his teeth as he was going, someone hit an arrow, hit him in the eye. So this is where we talk about when it's like a butchering or a very harsh sort of description of someone passing or people dying in battle. These are the reasons why we come here and remember these brave souls. It said that Abbas is then hit on the back of the head with a piece of iron, and of course he has no hands to be able to protect himself. So as he drops from the horse, he goes face first into the sands of Karbala. And that again for the Imam was a very, very difficult time for him to able to do. And it said that the Imam said, "Oh, now my back has been broken." And then we find that as the Imam is coming towards realization that there is no one left in terms of the adults in his army, the Imam then makes a sound, a kind of plea, which means, "Is there anyone left to help me?" And at that point, it is sort of narrated in some of the history books that there was a baby who started to cry, and this baby we all know as Ali al-Asghar. In some narrations, he's known as Abdullah ibn Radi, which means Abdullah the infant. But whichever way you look at it, an infant was there, and then the mother of the infant says to the Imam, please try to get him some water. He goes to the enemy and says to them, this kid or child or baby has not done anything to you, please give him some water. And the enemy think about it and they look towards each other, but no one really wants to make that first move. And then it is said that a signal was made to a famous archer known as Hurmala, and Hurmala, it is said, gets a arrow which has been described as a three-pronged arrow, and it is said that that three-pronged arrow is then aimed at the baby and it is shot, and as it's shot, the sort of narrations say that as it hits the baby starts to flap its arms, a bit like a fish when it comes out of the water. And we find that this is kind of, again, another heart-rending scene for the Imam to take, and the Imam has to go through this all on a single day. And then as the Imam is kind of coming to his final conclusion and his final battle with the enemies, there is another child of Imam Hassan called Abdullah, who also tries to come to the rescue of the Imam during his final moments, and he is also hit with an arrow on his arm and on his chest. So we find that the day of Ashura is a day of tragedy, and one that we should never forget, and make sure we never forget, because this kind of thing is something that we hold on to dearly. And to bring it back to a real life kind of scenario, this day scenario, we kind of see people around the world these days that kind of are inspired by Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the stance of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and how he, although he may have lost in the battlefield in terms of the numbers, the actual real victory was with the Imam, and right from wrong became clear following the day of Ashura. Salawat ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali